I remember one time I worked at a place and I was friends with my boss, and her mother would come to visit. So, older white woman. And one day I had braids or something. And then, like, the next day I came in without braids. I did this magical Black girl transformation.
Hey everyone, it's Jodi Amen here. I am in a doctoral program for social work, and for one of my classes, we are to record a podcast interview. So you will hear this very special interview that we're doing today with my partner, Natalie McCabe, and we're interviewing Genie Dawkins and Nikki Blak for this. And we're going to introduce our topic for you, but I just wanted to let you know what we're all doing here and what this video is all about. So glad that you're here watching, and enjoy.
So this podcast idea came up as a result of Jodi and I being in another course together, and our white professor decided to make some, I don't think it was intentional, some insensitive comments. And then when it was brought to her attention that, it was kind of insensitive or I felt uncomfortable, she kind of dismissed it. So Jodi and I thought about, let's talk about impact versus intention, or intention versus impact, and kind of get to the root of it, especially when you're dealing with discussions about equity and diversity and inclusion and power dynamic, because all of those was very in your face in that moment. There was a power imbalance. There was a diversity issue. We talked about equity and the whole thing. So we wanted to bring you two experts on to get your opinions, your thoughts, and have you dealt with anything similar, or do you have any ideas or thoughts about impact versus intention? And we'll start with either one of you.
Okay. I'll go. So I have seen the difference between impact and intention in several ways. As a parent, as a Black parent of a child with special needs, you see it a lot. So you have people who are specialists, and they come there, how they are talking to me is like their intention is they want the best for my child. However, when you start spouting facts such as, well, we know that Black kids don't typically graduate, or Black kids are usually behind, it mitigates your intention. It takes away from your intention, because your impact is you've already decided the trajectory of my child's success because they're Black. So then I have to come in, and I have to come in as a specialist. I have to come in and give you all these facts on why my child can be just as successful. Mm-hmm. But why do I have to prove myself? Why do you already have a bias against my child? But your intent is, really, you don't mean any harm. So even when I'm talking to them and I'm saying just because my son is Black does not necessarily mean that he falls in alignment with those numbers, because there are other factors. Oh, that's not our intent. We didn't mean to make you feel that we were saying that, but that is what you're saying. But then even with that, I didn't mean to moment, you are still not receiving the fact that you may not have intentionally meant that, but you do feel that way. Your impact is exactly what it was intended to do. Your impact was to disempower me by what you know and your statistics, to get me to enroll, and that my child, the goals that I have for my child are too high.
Too lofty.
So we're going to unintentionally break you down to accept your child can't be more than this. So that's my whole idea with intent and impact. When you're dealing with someone who doesn't know, you're dealing with a parent who really is looking to you to help them. Like, I just want you to help my child. And then that's what you come in. You come with this intent that you don't mean harm, but at the same time, you're saying my child will never be more than this.
Does it feel like a double offense? So one saying it and then excusing.
Yep. And they never say, I'm sorry. It's more like, you're giving me an excuse. Well, I didn't mean to. But I didn't, but you never say, well, I apologize for offending you, you know. And I deal with a lot because both my children have autism. I've been told, we don't think your son has autism because he's so verbal, he's so bright. But you know, it's the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So are you, at this point in time, are you looking at his ability, or are you looking at his color? What are you looking at when you say that to me? Because would you say that to another parent? Would you say it to a white parent? I don't think you would.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Nikki, what about you? Do you have an experience?
Well, yeah, I have quite a few experiences. I just wanted to speak to that portion about the double offense. And this is the case not just when dealing with strangers. This is not just when talking about race or, you know, or power or marginalized or oppressed people, but just in life general, you know, even in your interpersonal relationships. If you are offended, if someone causes harm to you, but then they deny that they caused harm, they gaslight you, or they minimize, you know, what happened, then it does become, it's not about the act now, it's about your attitude regarding the fact that I am taking you to task about this, when you could just be you can just have integrity and acknowledge and validate my feelings, and then we can move on. So now I don't trust you. Now I'm wondering actually what was your intention, because you're saying that was not intentional, but when you have an opportunity to correct it and make it right, to make me whole, you don't even want to acknowledge what happened. So that's especially problematic, and I that is one of my pet peeves in life, period. Like, you know, just not being upfront and just not being mature about, you know, the fact that yes, everyone causes harm. Every single person on the planet, we are the villain in someone's story. So we can get past that and, you know, let that be what it is, and then try to do better. But it makes me call into question, well, do you have an intention of doing better? Because when you erase, minimize, you know, gaslight me, is it so that you won't be accountable, and then you don't have to do any work going forward? And then you can always lean into, well, wasn't my intention? Well, or in instances where we're talking about specifically racial discrimination, the insidious thing about racism is that the marginalized and oppressed person or group has to question whether or not the treatment they're receiving is based on race, or if this was intentional, or is it something else about me? So you didn't get the apartment. Was it because of my color? Why didn't I get the job? Was it because I wasn't qualified, or was it my race? And so that is a part of, you know, what happens when we're experiencing these slights, these microaggressions that some people will call them, which my good friend, Ebony Janice Moore, who's a womanist scholar, says there aren't any microaggressions. There are aggressions. Let's stop minimizing, but the more common term is microaggressions. And yeah, so I have experience, of course, just by virtue of the fact that I exist in the world as Black and female, that people will make comments, and it's not just because they're not thinking, or because some of this is language, right? Like, couch what you have to say in some tact. Like, think about, you know, how you present this information, because it can be factual, but do you have to say it like that? Like, what is your tone when you say it? What, you know, what are the circumstances surrounding how you say this thing? That may be necessary to say. It may be valid. It may be important. It may not be wrong. So it's not just that people don't have tact and couth, as my mother says, but it is that Bell Hooks says, in a racially imperialist nation such as ours, it is the dominant race that reserves for itself the luxury of dismissing racial identity, while the oppressed race is made daily aware of their racial identity. It is the dominant race that can make it seem that their experience is representative, meaning that I'm always aware of my race. I'm always aware of my womanness. I'm always aware of all of the intersections that cause me to be categorized as other. Whiteness, over and over again, makes it's the default. It is without race. It is, and it is an individual. It's the most important part. It's not a group of people, it's an individual. So while other groups, Black, Latinx, gay, trans, immigrant, whatever, are always groups of people, those people. But then white people get to be individuals, and therefore their actions don't reflect on their whole group, supposedly. And so because of that, if it doesn't affect me, then I don't have to be aware of it. I don't have to be sensitive to, how this may land and the impact of my words or actions, because it doesn't affect me, because I am the default. I don't have to think about race. A lot of people, a lot of white people, when they're confronted with conversations about race, short circuit because it's a concept like, what is this even, like, because they don't have race. And so I think that's a part of what the root is. Like I specifically, and it happens a lot. Thank you for thank you, Genie, for bringing up the medical. Like that's where it happens quite a bit, especially being a Black mother. We're talked down to, dismissed. I've been talked down to and dismissed in many doctors' offices, in workplaces. And people are very cavalier about just expressing themselves. I remember one time I worked at a place, and my boss at the time, it was a very small company and it was great. And I was friends with my boss, and her mother would come to visit. So older white woman whom I had a relationship with, kind relationship and rapport with. And one day I had braids or something. And then like the next day I came in without braids. I did this magical Black girl transformation. And I can't even remember what my hair looked like out of the braids. But she said, "Oh, what happened to your beautiful hair?" What does this mean? This is my beautiful hair. And so, that was 15 years ago. I still remember that. So the impact, I'm still telling that story. Yeah, lasting impact. And she may not have meant anything by it, but what can you understand how that may come across? And it's a different conversation, right? When you say this to a Black woman versus when you say this to a woman with fine hair, straight hair,
there's a whole historical there's a lot of history behind those statements.
Commenting on my hair, period. Just
Absolutely.
Don't. So yeah. I've definitely had multiple experiences.
I want to something you said about having the luxury, that I use that very word. I think I try to use luxury as opposed to privilege, because it's already it's been so overused, and a lot of times I find that white people tend to close off when they hear the word privilege and not want to even engage at all. So I said that during the exchange that we had, about you have the luxury to think of it that way, whereas though I don't view it as a Black woman, I don't view it that way at all, and it's hurtful, and it's still scary in 2021. So we were talking about the South at the time. Just to give you a little bit more context, we were talking about the South at the time and finding the reward or the benefits and enjoying the culture of the South. and what that looks like. And the Confederate flag came up and other things came up, and I was having a hard time finding the good, and the audacity for me was, how could you even say it? So I was having, as Jodi saw, I was having a hard time even processing that information, try to articulate. You have the luxury to separate it, where when I think about the South, I think about my experiences, and I think about the Confederate flag, and I think about all those things that you are saying, this is great and this is such rich history. And I'm saying, what history are you talking about? Because their history is not the history that I experienced, right? So I would like that you use the word luxury, because I think that's a great synonym for the word privilege, especially when talking about race.
Certainly.
Yeah. I saw you, Genie, shaking your head as well. I know I didn't introduce you all. I really apologize. Maybe I love what you're all saying and sharing. So, but maybe you could say a few words, all of you, about who you are and where people, could get more from you if they're liking what you say, and then we'll continue this conversation because it's really rich and there's more to unpack here.
Okay, so I'm Jeannie Dawkins, and I'm the host of the Parent and Cipher podcast for Black parents with special needs kids. And we discuss topics that support you with the education, home life, and the medical world, so that your child can make progress instead of just sitting in it. And we give you hope. So my whole purpose is that when it comes to resources, to doctors who really are going to explain what's going on, when you talk about education, navigating is hard. And I was listening to a podcast. Actually, I was listening to a podcast, and I was talking to a woman, and she was like, white people are really good at hiding resources. And one of the things that I do is I have the resources and I put it on my podcast and my website, because it's not that one of the things is a microaggression, but it's just a fact that you'll always hear when people want to talk about Black people, is that you don't try hard enough, or you don't want that information, or it's just easy. You don't want to do anything hard, when actuality, we are the hardest working people to get anything that we need. But it's the fact that it's interwoven into a exclusive club where we're not part of that. So we don't get access to those resources. You have a woman over here who's getting all of her child's psychiatric care cared for. I can't find it. I would have to tap into a resource, a white owned resource, to get that information. And the Parent and Cipher is doing that for Black families. Like, I have a whole thing with that, as well as the medical world. It's that whole, how in the heck do we have more deaths giving birth? Like Nikki said, when you go into a doctor's office and you tell them what's going on with your family's medical history, it's just dismissed, because they've already looked at you and determined, oh, you're a C-section. Oh, you're going to be diabetic. So they don't even test you early, because you're going to take this insulin. They just take a look, just like Nikki said, they take a look at one of us and it represents all of us. And it's a constant uphill battle to sustain what is true. Even with my kids, I had to fight. I had to learn all of these things just so someone would listen to me. Because as far as I'm concerned, you don't know my economic background. You don't know my educational background. The only thing you see is my color. That's the only thing you see. So you're going to tell me what's going on. And when I open up my mouth and I start writing letters, they were like, oh, do you have a lawyer? No, I have a lawyer. I have a BA and I have a master's degree. So I know what I'm talking about. And they were like, oh, okay. You want to sit there and tell me what dyslexia is. Just because you're a special education major and you know what dyslexia, the medical term, is, you don't know what it looks like in real life. And I had to sit there and tell her all the different kinds of dyslexia. But I should not have to do that. If I was white, I probably wouldn't have to do that. But I have to go over for you to listen to me, for you to stop seeing my color and listen to the words out of my mouth. Another thing with special needs kids, you always want to make it a behavior problem. Why is that? Because you already have in your mind school to prison pipeline. You've already established at the age of 5 that my child's going to prison. Well, how many of your children go to prison? Why is that? So you have kids who are special needs, Black parents. Ooh, I don't want that. Why they don't want that? Because they already know. Mm-hmm. They know what it's used for us, but they don't know that people with privilege, and we're not just talking about race, we talk about economic privilege. Mm-hmm. They get that from day one, because the goal is college. Mm-hmm. The goal is up to 48 hours on the SAT or ACT test. It's the accommodations that go with college. Mm-hmm. But for my child, if I don't know how to advocate, it's just a streamline to prison. It's a streamline to a certificate. And it's unfortunate because a lot of us don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the time to sit there and dig. The only thing you know is you're sitting in a room with people who've already judged you and your child, and already decided your child's going to be a failure. So now you're in this constant fight. And like Nikki said, you start to question your sanity. You start to question, am I trying to think my child is more than he is? But on the other hand, you see a Black child and he has ADHD and he has autism and he just graduated at the age of 7 from Harvard University. And as soon as I see that picture, you know what I know? I know that child's parents not Black. I know, and immediately, this child was adopted and it's a white family. And that right there, to me, speaks volumes. Mm-hmm.
Available resources, like you said.
But it's also how we're socialized with media. So you can be, as a Black child with autism, you can be successful if you have a white parent behind them. Mm. It's one of the things that I had stand out for me this past year is how you can be unintentional, you can be woke, but you still can be socialized. Mm-hmm. Because how we respond to microaggressions as a culture, we have our ways of responding to a point where we, especially to our kids, we don't want them to even have to feel it yet. But don't worry about, baby, that's how they are. Mm-hmm. No, it's okay, baby. Don't worry about that. You don't have to. But they're gonna feel it. They're gonna feel it sooner or later. And my son said to me, he said, Mommy, the kids in my school racist. And I said, well, why are they racist? He said, well, because whenever we go play this game, they always give me the black piece. And my socialized self said, well, no, they're not really racist. He said, Mommy, they are giving me the black piece because I'm Black. And I had to wait. I was like, oh, snap. When did you get that socialized? When did you start downplaying what's going on? So he and I had this conversation about bias versus racism. And I said, what you have to do is next time someone does it, ask them why they're giving you the black piece. He said, what if they say because I'm Black? I said, well, most often they're kids, they're probably not going to say that. I said, but what you do is you empower yourself to say, just because I'm Black doesn't mean that I want the black piece. I said, you have to start pointing it out and letting people know, like, this is what you're doing to me. I'm raised in the 70s by people who are born in the 50s. Our immediate response is to be quiet, to let it lie. Don't make too many waves, baby. Just be quiet. But my son is different and he's voicing it and I'm behind him 100%. Hello. How come we don't have any black books? Why don't we have any black books in school? Oh, we're going to get some. Oh, no. When are you going to get the black books? Well, I made books like Muhammad Ali. You have to show me right now you're going to get these black books. I am in the back cringing because I'm raised in a time where you are not supposed to point out when people are being aggressive, when they are doing things to you. And I realized in that context that And us as a culture trying to keep our kids safe so that you'll come home to me, we have inadvertently created a culture of acceptance and approval. You don't know you're wrong because I've never told you you're wrong. I've never said, why do you think that? I've never asked you questions to make yourself wonder, why are you saying that to me of all people? And how about this? And you feel free saying it. As though you have the right. You don't know me as an individual. So why do you think it's okay for you to do that to me? It's like the incident a couple of months ago. The woman lost her phone. She immediately tries to grab the phone from the little kid. You would not have done that if that was a white child. You would not have done that. You did that because you felt the luxury and the entitlement to do that because he's Black and you're no longer saying a child. And that is one of my peeves, is how come our kids don't get to be kids? How come they don't get to be free? Just like Nikki said, you can't get away from who you are. And just like I have to understand, I'm raising 2 Black boys. So sometimes I have to step back because my fear for them becomes to an extent where I'm asking myself, are you empowering them? Or are you disempowering them because you don't want them to bring attention to themselves? It doesn't matter what you do either way. They're still Black men. They're still Black boys and Black men. And as soon as someone sees them, that's all they're going to see. They're not going to see a disability. They're not going to see that they're a child. They're just going to see that they're Black and they're boys. And we have been indoctrinated into a systemic racist culture that has already identified us as the evil, us as the villain, us as the ones that are going to be aggressive. No matter how much we're no longer aggressive. Like my son said this to, I have 2 sons. They're 10 and 9. They both on spectrum. My 9-year-old said, if someone is racist to me, I'm going to tell them you racist to me and I don't like it. Right? My 13-year-old said to him, well, sometimes they don't know they're racist. You just have to point it out. And when you think about it, he was like, they people do things and they're racist and they're mean to us and they think that we're less than them. But in turn, we're not mean to them. He said, so when you think about it, we're kind of better than them. And I was like, okay, if that's where we're going.
It's that moral superiority that Toni Morrison talks about, that her dad felt that he had. Yeah.
And it's,
your baby's on to something.
But, I was like, okay, well, we can go there, but also let's think about this. But having these conversations freely is different when you grow up and it's always they. We don't, be quiet. You got to be, if you go out, you have to look, we have to be, if they say it back in the day, you got to be on the 9s. You got to be tight, because immediately what I want you to see is that I take care of my kids and I am not poor or dirty. When you go in a restaurant, we do all the things because we want you to feel like, oh, we're cultured, we civilized. But at the same time, you look at another table and it's a white family, the child has her feet in the chair, all types of stuff. And it's like the judgment, like you already know, if my child did that, they would.
It's a different,
And they're looking, and people are looking. Speaking of microaggressions, I had someone walk up to me and tell me, you had the best behaved children I've ever seen. And immediately, Nikki, I thought, are you saying my kids are good because they're good for being Black kids? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying? I can't even separate the fact that afterwards I left and I thought about it. And I was like, maybe she didn't mean it that way, because there was another family over here and they were white and their kids were loud and rambunctious. I think one child had her foot on the table. Maybe it wasn't because I'm Black.
Nikki's laughing.
Maybe was it? But it's that, back to that conversation, intent and impact.
Mm-hmm.
Her intent was to give me a
Compliment.
a compliment. Like, oh, so, but how I was impacted, I left. And like I told you, I thought about that thing. I thought about that. Like that, like Nikki said, that was years ago. And I still think about that. I'm still questioning, like, what are you trying to say to me? What's going on? But she did. I really to this day, I think about it, I'm like, maybe she'll just give me a compliment because my kids was good that day. But I get compliments like that all the time. Just like my son goes to a restaurant and he says, can I have a cup of tea? She's like, oh, iced tea, sweet tea. He was like, no, I want a cup of black tea. I want a hot tea. She says, okay. He says, what kind do you have? And she said, excuse me. He said, can you bring me the box? And they're confused. And once again, I have to ask myself, are you confused because he's 7? Or are you confused because he's a little black boy? Because you immediately, when he says tea, you immediately said, you want some sweet tea. I was just saying. It's just a place of, sometimes, I was just doing a research on a Black woman schema. And I look at the Black woman schema and I say to myself, as a culture and as a Black woman, I do all these things to validate myself. For what reason? Because no matter how much we work and how hard we work and how much we toil and we embrace and live in this grit and grind mentality, at the end of the day, we are those people. We're all, like Nikki said, we're not individuals. We're all lumped in whenever you speak to us. My brother had a doctor tell him, well, you do know not to give your child Kool-Aid to drink. He's like a baby. And my brother was like, we didn't know how to take it.
There's only one way to take it.
So he asked her, he said, why would you say that to me? What is it about me that makes you think I'll give my child Kool-Aid? She says, well, statistics show that Black people give their children Kool-Aid, right? So my brother was like, exactly. My brother said, so, I didn't say nothing. He said, I didn't say anything because she's a doctor, but I had to go do my own research. Right. So when he did his research, he was like, well, you know what? Where they're getting these statistics from is that they're only sampling a portion of the population, which are low income, right? And I said, oh, okay. So what? There's more low income people than middle income people? Is that what's going on? He was like, I don't know. And actually, at one point, I had received WIC during maternity leave. And I remember the woman saying to me, well, don't give your child Kool-Aid. And I immediately thought, like, how stupid are you? Like, Nikki, who gives their children Kool-Aid? Okay, then this is where it gets funny. Because I'm on a bus. Later on, I'm on a bus. And I see, she must have been like maybe 17 years old. And I seen her bust out the Huggy and poured in the bottle.
It happens. Who does?
Like, oh, that's what's going on. But even in that context, immediately, because I am receiving WIC. And with that being said, when you're on maternity leave, you still are an employee, but you're not getting paid. Every time I would go, they would look at my income because they're basically, why are you here? Like, why are you here? You shouldn't be getting it. You have money. You shouldn't be getting it. And I'm like, what is the problem? Why are you worried about government funds that I pay my taxes for? Because Black people always try to get something free.
While according to their own regulations, to qualify for WIC, because I got WIC too when I was on maternity leave, you have to be under a certain income, and if you are receiving disability as you are on maternity leave, that is, you meet the qualifications.
Yep.
It's an
Anyone that
entitlement program. Absolutely.
yeah, anyone that's qualified can apply and take advantage of the program. And like you said, we pay our taxes clearly. As you were an employed person that was on maternity leave, you paid into this safety net, this social safety net.
But it's and like Nikki said, the medical word of microaggressions, they'll bring us statistics. Well, Black women have the highest rate of breast cancer. But hold up, wait a minute. If you were to actually do a survey of these women, I guarantee you that the majority of them would have said to you, I had concerns and I talked to my doctor and they told me not to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're dismissed. That's just like ingrained in the medical world is Black people can handle more pain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why is it? Why do you think that? Do you think we can handle more pain because historically all of your books that's written on science in the medical world, you at some point goes back to a slave that you tortured and you mutilated so they could withstand it, so they can endure more pain. That where is that? But that's a mainstay in the medical world that they go by when they treat Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give them this, give them that. I have an aunt who has like serious Black issues and they will not give her certain pain meds. And they told her because she's Black.
They told her that?
She's in Texas.
Oh.
Right. That's the conversation about the South. When you talked about the South, I was like, man, when I think about the South, and I'm in Washington, D.C., but when I grew up, the South was that place you don't want to be.
Exactly. and to this day, depending on what area, you don't want to go down there.
You know what I mean?
And people still getting lynched. And that's what I was trying to explain. Still getting lynched.
Still getting lynched. And I use Waze to travel. One time I was going in the South, and Waze took me down this back road, and I said, "Oh Lord, Waze don't know I'm Black. Waze does not know that there are places Black people should not be." And I feel like this background road is one of them. Like, we always stay on major roads, major highways. We don't take back ways. We don't do that. I remember one time it was broad daylight. We went a back way, and all I saw was Trump signs. I was like, oh, called my brother. I said, listen, now we on this back road, Trump signs. I said, we know we're trying to just get through it. But if something happens,
this is the last place I was.
But that's a reality.
For sure.
That most races don't have to deal with as a point of survival.
I brought this up in our discussion as well. So the same exact thing you're saying, the same exact example.
It's like, why would you want to go there? But it's getting better now. You have a bunch of people, moving from different spaces. But still.
There's still parts that you better not be in.
Oh yeah, I was just in South Carolina and I was talking to some people at the coffee shop and they told me not to cross the bridge. So where's the bridge? Where is it? They were like, just don't let Waze take you across the bridge. I'm like, what? Guess what? I'm ready to go home.
Thank you so much. Nikki, I would love you to introduce yourself, and it sounds like you have a lot of responses to what Genie said.
Yeah. Nothing was unfamiliar. All of that very, very heartfelt and understood. I'm Nikki Blak. I'm an artist. I'm a mother. I'm a sociologist. I'm an anti-oppression educator. People oftentimes would like to group me with the crop of anti-racism educators that are prevalent nowadays. And while I think that the work that they do is wonderful and necessary, I'm not nice enough to do that work, because racism is a symptom of a larger issue. And so instead of treating the symptom, I like to do as Angela Davis has defined being radical as simply grasping at the root. So I take that to heart in my personal life. I don't like treating symptoms. I like to find out what's causing the problem so that we can be done with this. And I take that same approach as we're dealing with the ways that we are socialized to marginalize and oppress certain groups of people. So yeah, I have a website, blakisbeautiful.com, BLAK is beautiful.com, where I can be found, and people can make connections to me via my virtual home. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I also have and my handle is Nikki Blak, NIKKI BLAK, in all the places. I also have a program organization called Interrupting Racism. Actually, it's the Interrupt series because it's also interrupting patriarchy, that I created some years ago, back when Trump got elected into office, as a resource for people to just gain confidence, get language around, interrupting racism when they encounter it. I was seeing a lot of well-meaning white people and some Black people too that wanted to confront racist Uncle Jack and wanted to confront their racist Mima, but didn't really know what to say or how to start. And so I created Interrupting Racism to empower and arm them to interrupt racism when they encounter it, because I believe that our platform is in our homes oftentimes, and in our families and in our communities. We think that we need to be doing this great anti-racism work out in the world and protesting and marching and going to jail and getting assassinated. And while that could very well be a part of your journey in anti-racism and liberation, that's not everyone's role. And it's not always the most impactful or meaningful. So Interrupting Racism, interruptseries.com is where you can find information about that. We have
and that's for white people who want some to know how to interrupt it. You said
it's for people. It's for people, really, because what I have learned is that, even Black people, the way that we are socialized, we're socialized in a racist, imperialist, anti-Black, anti-woman, anti-disabled, homo hostile, all of the things. We're socialized in this society, and things are withheld from us. Information is withheld from us. Lately, we're seeing conversations about Tulsa, but so many people did not know about Tulsa, Rosewood. People didn't know about the Zoot Suit riots. This is history. This is basic history. But people just don't have this information. And it's not just white people, it's Black people too. As Genie was saying as well, a part of the legacy of slavery, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow is silence amongst the people that were most impacted and harmed by it. And that silence is to protect us. And so we're also traumatized. Nobody wants to talk about, how they've been brutalized for generations, really. So we don't talk about a lot of things that happen, and they get buried in history. People don't know that Black people were put in concentration camps on United States soil, buried in mass graves. They don't, so it's for everybody. It's for anyone that wants to be empowered, educate themselves, be in a group and amongst like-minded people. because people are oftentimes isolated too. They don't have people around them that are having these conversations, sharing resources. They don't know, so they don't even get to flex that muscle that we get to all the time. I'm talking about racism every day of my life. I talk about oppression to someone. My conversations with my partner, who is also a sociologist, and um, he also studied gender studies. So he's like, we're having these conversations at the dinner table every day. So, but that's a privilege, that's a luxury that I have, that I'm surrounded by people that understand um, my my experience, or want to understand my experience as a marginalized and oppressed person in the United States. So, interrupting racism also provides that for people. So yeah, we're on Facebook, interruptseries.com. I also have a Patreon, where people can come and get additional tools and resources. I have a lot going on Patreon. So I'm easy to find. If anybody wants to find me, talk to me, hire me, they can.
I could attest to that. I do have a hard stop in like 7 minutes, but I do want to hear Nikki. It seemed like I could see your reaction to the things Genie said and those stories that illustrated so clearly what we're talking about. Any thoughts before we go on what you heard or what it connected to for you?
So much. I mean, Genie preached a whole sermon. So that's it. That's the podcast, really. but one of the questions that you all sent to me, and just to kind of prep me for what the conversation could possibly be about, was asking about um fragility. And the term fragility, I think that it's people are trying to move away from that because it implies for some people that white people are not capable of being confronted, or dealing with their racist history or current actions and ideologies. And so people are wanting to move away from that. And I understand that. I never understood fragility to mean that, though. For me, especially as a writer who writes, I write fiction, I write poetry. So metaphor is, really, really important to me. And fragility always was very accurate, that when handled, when approached, people shatter, fall apart, can't can't even. They just can't even process, and, like I like to say, short circuit. And so, but this is not inherent. This is not biological. This is due to literal hundreds of years of socialization. And all of us have been socialized. All of us are being socialized. Some people would suggest from birth, I say even before that. And then we understand that epigenetics is a thing and cellular memory is a thing. And so when you come from people that are allowed to just crash into the place and do whatever they want to do and not ever have to deal with the repercussions of their actions, when someone says something to you about the way that you are showing up in a conversation, that can feel like violence. And so, what I would say, in terms of power dynamic, in terms of confronting these issues, the reality is that I don't have anything nice and sweet to say about the risk that one takes when they say to a professor, hey, this is out of line. This smacks of racism. And I need you to know that. And so that you don't continue to do this. Because really, confrontation is an act of love. Audre Lorde said, if I've spoken to you in anger, at least I've spoken to you. I don't have to say anything to you. I could let you self-destruct, which is ultimately what this the acting out in racism, because like I said, it's a symptom of something else. It's ultimately what it leads to. it's gonna be some self-destruction. So we can deal with the fact that maybe you didn't mean to show up this way, but this is how you're showing up. This is why it's harmful. This is who it affects. For people confronting, perhaps trying to have some allies, perhaps trying to have other people in the space that can support you. Whether you be a person that is impacted by the statement or the action, or whether you're just trying to speak up, trying to create safety in numbers. Because the reality is that we live in a racist, patriarchal, homophobic society. It is not safe. So you're not going to be safe in confronting these systems and these ideologies. We have to create safety. And I believe that that's really the key to being able to push back against, these individuals and these entities that want to disempower us. It is to create community and create safety for ourselves, and also be willing to risk some things. As Sonia Renee Taylor of The Body Is Not an Apology has said, put some skin in the game. You might be sacrificing something. You may get a bad grade now. You may be at risk of losing your job or being reprimanded because you spoke up. You may lose some friends. This comes with the territory. But speaking up because it is the right thing to do, especially and particularly, and I'm saying this regarding people that are not impacted by it, but maybe they're seeking to be allies. Speaking up because it's the right thing to do is what we should be doing. That's the payment.
It's enough.
It's enough.
It is enough.
That's it. Activism is the rent that we pay for living on the planet. Alice Walker said this. So are we going to pay our rent? Are we going to be dignified and have integrity and do what is right and ethical and moral, or are we going to stand by and let it happen? So hopefully we feel emboldened to speak up and support each other in that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Both
Natalie,
of you.
You want to bring us home?
Sure. No, I appreciate both of you sharing so much. Both of y'all gave a message. Resonated with me on so many levels. I could identify with a lot of what you both were saying. I've worked in the medical field, so I've experienced it. I have friends who are doctors, and they are taught, as Genie talked about, that Black people can tolerate more pain. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And then they see it and they think that this is for everyone. And forgetting that, again, as Nikki said, that we are not monolithic, we are not all one, all the way across, or the same. So I'm just going to say I appreciate you again. I thank you. I would say my main takeaways from this is the last part of what Nikki said was that you create safety. That's how we can deal with those transgressions, because that was one of our questions. In interrupting that, both of you provided great resources. I hope to talk to you again in some capacity because this was amazing. I appreciate you both and the work that you do. So thank you. Jodi, did you have anything else that you wanted to say before we went?
I appreciate this. I took tons of notes and
Yeah, I did too.
so much from today. So I just, I want to hop back on again and do this again. This is just, I have another appointment right now, but I could keep going. And thank you so much. I mean, just the testimony and the stories really were opening. So, and Genie, I know you didn't tell your stuff, but I will, when I'm editing this video, I'll have it on the screen. So everyone who's listening to this will see that it's there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.